What if I told you that the very thing you're most afraid of, the collapse, the humiliation, the failure you try to outrun, is not your enemy, but your initiation? That every crack in your life, every fall you've endured, was not the universe punishing you, but shaping you. And that until you accept failure, not as an accident, but as a necessity, you will never truly rise. Take a moment and ask yourself, when was the last time you failed? Really failed? Maybe it was a relationship that ended, leaving you wondering if you'll ever be loved again. Maybe it was a dream you worked years for that slipped through your fingers. Or maybe it was quieter, a gnawing awareness that you've wasted time, that you've been moving in the wrong direction, living someone else's life instead of your own. In those moments, you felt exposed, naked, empty. You thought, this is the end of me. But here is the truth that society hides, the truth philosophers whisper, the truth you already know deep inside. Failure is not the end. Failure is the beginning. It is the fire. It is the silent sculptor, carving away who you pretended to be, so that who you really are can finally emerge. Philosophers have wrestled with this reality for centuries. Nietzsche declared, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Greatness, he insisted, doesn't come from smooth surfaces or easy victories. It comes from collapse, from chaos, from the nights that strip you bare. Plato, in his allegory of the cave, imagined prisoners chained in darkness, mistaking shadows for reality. Their escape was painful, even blinding. The truth wasn't revealed in comfort, but in rupture, in the violent tearing away of illusion. Failure is like that blinding light. It hurts, but it shows you reality. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, standing against the Nazi regime, paid the ultimate price. To the world, his resistance ended in failure, imprisoned, executed, silenced. Yet his so-called failure became his triumph. His courage outlived him, whispering through history that integrity sometimes requires us to fall, that the meaning of a life cannot be measured by worldly success. Even Machiavelli, often misread as a cynic, understood this paradox. He wrote that fortune favors the bold, but fortune is also cruel. His own life was proof. Exiled, disgraced, tortured. Yet in his so-called failure, he wrote The Prince, one of the most enduring works of political philosophy. Had he remained comfortable, he may have written nothing at all. So why do we treat failure like a stain, something to be hidden away, instead of the very forge that makes us human? Maybe because failure feels like death. And in a way, it is. The death of who you thought you were. The death of the story you've been telling yourself. The death of illusions you built to protect yourself from the truth. But here's the uncomfortable paradox. Without these small deaths, there can be no rebirth. Without collapse, there is no rise. Without falling apart, there is no becoming whole. Psychologists call this ego death. It happens when life shatters your self-image, when your carefully crafted identity crumbles. It feels unbearable, like standing naked in front of the universe. But it's also liberation. The seed cannot become a tree until it splits. The caterpillar cannot grow wings without destroying its old form. And you cannot become who you're meant to be until parts of you die. History overflows with stories of failure as the seed of greatness. Consider Abraham Lincoln. He failed in business. He failed in politics, again and again. He failed in love. He wrestled with depression so heavy, he once wrote that he was the most miserable man living. To most, he was a nobody destined for nothing. Yet every failure carved him, deepened him, humbled him. And when the time came to lead a broken nation through its bloodiest war, he was not a perfect man, but a man forged by failure into steel. Or take Vincent van Gogh. He sold one painting in his lifetime. One. To the world, he was a failure, an outcast, a madman. But in that exile, in those nights of despair, he painted anyway. He painted not because of recognition, but in spite of rejection. And in those brush strokes, he gave us colors the world had never seen. His failure in life became his immortality in death. Look too at J.K. Rowling. Before Harry Potter, she was a single mother, broke, rejected by publishers again and again. She described herself as a failure on an epic scale. Yet it was precisely at rock bottom that she found clarity. I had nothing left to lose, and so I could direct all my energy into finishing the only work that mattered to me. Failure stripped her of distraction, and in that void, her story was born. But here's the twist. The value of failure isn't just that these people eventually won, it's that their failures transformed them. Without the pain, without the collapse, they would not have become people capable of carrying success. Failure isn't just part of the story, it is the story. And yet, most of us live as if failure were the enemy. We chase perfection. We polish ourselves for approval. We stay safe. We avoid risk. We numb ourselves with distraction, scrolling, shopping, binge-watching, anything to silence that quiet dread of falling short. But here's the cruel irony. By avoiding failure, you fail anyway. You fail to live. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But here's a modern twist. It is better to be broken than untouched. Because an untouched life may be safe, but it is sterile. A glass kept on the shelf never shatters, but it also never holds water. So I ask you, what is your greatest failure? Not the minor mistakes, not the daily stumbles, but the one you hide even from yourself, the one that still wakes you at night. What if that failure isn't a scar, but a doorway? What if the place you think you're weakest is the place you're being remade? This is the radical truth of philosophy. Failure is not a detour from your path. Failure is the path. But let's be clear, failure alone doesn't guarantee growth. Some people fall and stay fallen. Some people let failure define them. Some people never rise again. The difference is whether you're willing to sit in the ashes, to let the pain break you open instead of closing you off, to let it hollow you out so that something greater can grow inside. Carl Jung believed that what we most need will be found where we least want to look, that the shadow, the failure, the humiliation, the part of ourselves we fear, holds the key to wholeness, but we must turn toward it, not away. Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of fate, to not just accept what happens to us, but to embrace it as though we had chosen it, to look at failure not as an accident to be resented, but as a gift to be loved. Because when you love your failures, they cannot defeat you. They become your fuel. Think of the myths and stories that shaped us. Odysseus lost his way for 10 years. Dante was lost in a dark forest. Frodo nearly gave in to the ring. Every hero's journey contains the same pattern, the fall before the rise. Why? Because it mirrors us. Because our lives are made of the same arc. Even in religion, the pattern repeats. In Christianity, death precedes resurrection. In Buddhism, suffering precedes enlightenment. In every tradition, failure, falling, breaking, suffering is not an error in the story. It is the very center of it. So maybe you're here watching this, and you're in the middle of your own collapse. Maybe you've lost someone. Maybe you've lost yourself. Maybe you're staring at the ruins of a life You don't know how to rebuild, and you think this is the end, but it isn't. It's the beginning of something you cannot yet see. The philosophy of failure is this: your cracks are not signs of weakness. They are openings. Openings for light. Openings for truth. Openings for rebirth. Failure isn't here to destroy you. It's here to strip away what was never truly yours. The masks, the illusions, the borrowed dreams. It hurts. Yes, it always will. But that hurt is the hammer shaping you into something unbreakable. So let me leave you with this question. What if your failures are not curses, but invitations? Invitations to grow deeper, to see yourself more clearly, to rise higher than you ever thought possible. You will fall. That much is certain. But maybe falling is not a tragedy. Maybe it is the only way to rise. And maybe, just maybe, the life you've been searching for is waiting for you, not in spite of your failures, but because of them.